They say that as we get older, our eyes start to fail us. We need reading glasses for the morning paper. We squint at street signs in the dark. But I have found that while our physical vision might blur, a different kind of sight becomes sharper. It is the sight of the gut, the intuition. When you have lived 50 or 60 years, you know what the truth feels like, even before you have the evidence to prove it. And you certainly know what a lie feels like. It feels like a draft in a room where all the windows are closed. You feel the chill before you know where it is coming from. I was halfway up the driveway when that chill hit me. It was a Tuesday evening. The sky was that bruised purple color you get right before night truly settles in. I was tired. It was a kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes not just from a long day at the office, but from a long few years of trying to keep life steady. I was looking forward to the silence of my house. I was looking forward to dinner with Sarah. We had been married 5 years. Not a lifetime, but long enough to have rhythms, long enough to have comfortable silences. Or so I thought. I parked my car and walked past Sarah's silver SUV. I almost didn't look. Why would I? It was just a car. It was just a driveway. But something caught my eye, a shape that didn't belong in the orderly landscape of our lives. It was half hidden under a yoga blanket in the back seat, a man's jacket. I stopped. My keys were already in my hand, the metal biting into my palm. I stared through the tinted glass. It wasn't mine. I don't own corduroy. I don't wear tan. This was a specific kind of jacket. It had corded cuffs and a worn-in look. It was the kind of item a man leaves behind when he is comfortable. You don't forget a jacket like that in a woman's car unless you were in no rush to leave, unless your mind was occupied with other things. My heart didn't race. That's the funny thing about these moments. In the movies, the heart pounds. In real life, for a man my age, the heart just drops. It felt like a stone falling down a deep well. I stood there for a long minute, just breathing in the cool evening air. I knew, the moment I opened that front door, my life was going to change. There is a heavy sadness in that knowing. You want to turn back. You want to get in your car and drive away and pretend you never saw it. But we are too old for pretend. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. The scent hit me first. Roasted garlic, lemon, and thyme. It was her signature roast chicken. It was a meal she made when she wanted to apologize, or when she wanted to celebrate, or, as I was about to learn, when she wanted to distract. The house was dim. A candle flickered on the kitchen island. Smooth jazz played low from the speakers. It was a stage set. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Sarah was at the stove. She turned when she heard my footsteps. She flashed me a smile, but it was too quick. It didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile she had rehearsed in the mirror while the chicken was browning. "Long day?" she asked. Her voice was light, airy. She slid a plate onto the counter. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I looked for the woman I had married, the one who used to greet me with messy hair and a genuine hug. I didn't see her. I saw a performer. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Yours?" She shrugged, turning back to the salad bowl. "Oh, casual. The usual. Ran a little late. I had to give a coworker a ride home. He's new. Got lost. Poor guy." She said it so easily. The lies that roll off the tongue effortlessly are the ones that hurt the most. It means she has done this before. It means she has practiced. My fork froze halfway in my mouth. I set it down slowly. The clink against the ceramic plate sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Coworker?" I repeated. I kept my voice low, measured. I wasn't going to yell. Yelling is for the young and the confused. I wasn't confused. That wouldn't be the owner of the tan corduroy jacket in your back seat, would it? She blinked. Just once. It was a microscopic glitch in her performance. Her smile stiffened around the edges, like concrete drying too fast. "Oh, that," she said. She let out a laugh, but it didn't land. It hung in the air, hollow and brittle. "Yeah, that's his." I told him to grab it. But he forgot. He was so flustered about being lost. Did he forget? I asked. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the granite. "Or did you forget to mention it before I saw it with my own eyes?" She didn't answer right away. She stared down at her food. I watched her calculate. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes. She was deciding which mask to wear. The victim? The outraged wife? The forgetful spouse? She chose outraged. Michael, seriously? She looked up, her eyes wide with feigned disbelief. You think I'm cheating because of the jacket? I think, I said softly, that people don't leave their clothes behind unless they feel comfortable, unless they feel familiar. Oh, my God, she said, shaking her head. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the tile floor. This is ridiculous. No, Sarah, what is ridiculous is thinking you can toss a man's jacket into your car and expect me not to notice. You think because I am quiet, I am blind? She snapped then. He needed a ride. That is it. You think I would be that careless? You think if I were doing something, I would leave evidence in the back seat? Wouldn't you? I asked. The room went silent. The jazz music seemed to mock us, playing a cheerful saxophone riff while our marriage disintegrated over roasted chicken. Her lip twitched. She hated when I was calm. She wanted me to scream so she could call me crazy. She wanted me to throw things so she could call me abusive. But I just sat there witnessing her. This is about you, she said sharply. She was flipping the script. It is a classic tactic. If you are caught, accuse the accuser. You have been distant for weeks. You don't touch me. You don't look at me the same. So maybe you are just looking for an excuse to fight. I stood up then. My knees felt stiff. Don't you dare flip this on me. I am not flipping anything, she hissed. Her voice was tight, vibrating with a nervous energy. I am trying to keep this house together. Keep us together while you go all FBI over a jacket. Because it doesn't feel like just a jacket, Sarah, I said. It feels like the first clue. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a second, the mask slipped completely, and I saw fear. Real fear, not because she was afraid of losing me, but because she was afraid of being caught. There is a difference. She picked up her wine glass. She took a long, measured sip. When she set it down, she looked at me with a coldness that froze the blood in my veins. Maybe, she said, if you spent less time being suspicious and more time being a husband, I wouldn't need a ride home from someone else. That hit harder than I wanted it to. It was a low blow. It was designed to cripple my confidence, to make me shoulder the blame for her betrayal. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just sat back down. The weight of those words settled like wet concrete in my chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But as I looked at the woman across the table, the woman I had promised to love in sickness and in health, I realized something profound. We were not fighting a misunderstanding. We were fighting a war. And the most dangerous part of this war was that she thought she could win by making me doubt my own reality. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I felt. The jacket was real. The distance was real. And the stranger sitting across from me, eating chicken as if she hadn't just shattered our world, she was real, too. I pushed my plate away. I had lost my appetite. I had a feeling I wouldn't be hungry for a long, long time. That night, the house was too quiet. You know the kind of quiet I mean. It isn't the peaceful silence of a library or the comfortable hush of a Sunday afternoon nap. It was a heavy, pressurized silence. It felt like the air inside a balloon right before it pops. Even the hum of the refrigerator downstairs sounded loud, an intrusive drone scratching against the walls. I lay on my side of the bed, staring at the window. The blinds were drawn, but the faint orange glow of the street lamp bled through the slats. It cast long, prison bar shadows across the duvet. I kept my back to her. I focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. I was trying to slow the racing of my mind, trying to convince my body that it was time to rest. But my body knew better. My body knew there was a stranger in the bed. Then I felt the mattress shift. It was subtle at first. A rustle of sheets. The warmth of a body moving closer. Sarah's hand brushed my arm. It was a light touch, feather soft. It was the way she always started when she wanted to bridge a gap, when she wanted to skip the apology and go straight to forgiveness. "You're tense," she whispered. Her breath was warm against the back of my ear. A year ago, that warmth would have sent a shiver of comfort down my spine. Tonight, it made my skin crawl. I didn't move. I stared at the shadows on the blanket. "I'm fine," I said. My voice was rough, dry. She laughed softly. It was a rehearsed sound, low and throaty. "No, you're not. You've been wound up since dinner. Let me fix that." Her fingers trailed down my chest. The movement was slow, deliberate. She kissed the curve of my shoulder, her lips lingering there. She was rewriting the narrative of the evening. She was trying to use intimacy as an eraser. She thought if she could just get me to turn around, to hold her, to want her, then the jacket in the car would cease to exist. If we were lovers, we couldn't be enemies. That was her logic. I stayed still, rigid. I felt like a statue carved from cold stone. "Michael," she murmured, sliding her leg over mine. "Don't act like you don't want me." Finally, I turned my head. I looked at her. In the low light, her eyes shone. They were wide, expectant, even a little desperate. She was waiting for me to play my part. She was waiting for me to sigh, to give in, to wrap my arms around her and tell her I was a fool for doubting her. She wanted the scene to end with a fade to black, a romantic resolution. But something inside me recoiled. The touch that used to feel like coming home now felt like a strategy. It felt calculated. "I don't," I said flatly. Her hand froze on my chest. For a moment, her mask slipped. The seduction vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine shock. She pulled back, her face tightening. "What is that supposed to mean?" she asked. I shifted away, putting inches of cool sheet between us. "It means I am not in the mood to be manipulated." She sat up. She yanked the blanket around herself, clutching it to her chest like armor. The softness was gone. The actress had walked off stage, and the defensive wife had taken her place. "Manipulated?" She spat the word out. "Are you kidding me? I am trying to connect with my husband. I am trying to be close to you. And you call it manipulation?" I pushed myself upright, rested my back against the headboard. I was tired, so tired, but I needed to say this. "You think I don't see through this?" I asked, my voice low in the dark. "You pick a fight at dinner. You gaslight me about what I saw. And then you crawl into bed pretending everything is fine. Like if you kiss me hard enough, I will forget the jacket exists." She scoffed. It was a sharp, ugly sound in the dark. "So now I can't touch my own husband without being accused of plotting? Is that where we are?" "It isn't the touch, Sarah," I said. "It is the timing." Her eyes narrowed. She looked at me with something that resembled hate. Or maybe it was just the frustration of a magician whose trick has failed. "You are impossible," she said. "Do you even hear yourself? You are cold, always cold. Maybe that is why I need." She stopped herself. She bit down on the words, cutting them off before they could escape. My pulse hammered in my neck. I looked at her. "Why? You need what?" "Forget it," she snapped. She lay back down, turning her back to me aggressively. She pulled the duvet up to her chin. "You twist everything." "No, Sarah," I whispered. "You are twisting everything. And the worst part is you are good at it. You almost had me thinking this was my fault." She didn't answer. She just pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. It was a wall, a physical barrier to match the emotional one she had built weeks ago. I sat there in the dark for a long time. My jaw was clenched so hard my teeth ached. My chest burned with a mixture of anger and grief. I looked around the room. This bedroom. We had painted these walls together a soft sage green because Sarah read it promoted tranquility. We had bought this bed frame at an estate sale and spent a weekend sanding it down. For years, this room had been a sanctuary. It was the place where we laughed over nothing. It was a place where we whispered about our dreams, about vacations we never took, about growing old together. But tonight, it wasn't a sanctuary. It was a battlefield. It was a war zone dressed in soft sheets and dim lamplight. I realized then that the woman sleeping, or pretending to sleep, next to me was dangerous. Not because she could hurt me physically, but because she could look me in the eye, lie to my face, and then try to use my love for her as a weapon against me. I lay back down, but I stayed on the very edge of the mattress. Every inch of space between us felt like a canyon. I stared at the ceiling. I knew something for certain. Wars aren't won in one night. They drag on. They consist of silent skirmishes, small territories lost and gained. They are wars of attrition. She thought that if she ignored me, if she denied it long enough, I would surrender. I would get tired of the fighting and just accept her version of reality. But I wasn't surrendering. Not this time. The breathing rhythm of the room changed. Her breathing evened out, deepened. She was asleep. Or she was doing a very good impression of it. I listened to the rhythm. In, out, in, out. I didn't sleep. I lay there and formulated a plan. I needed to see clearly. I needed to stop listening to her words and start watching her actions. Because words can lie. But actions always tell the truth, eventually. Tomorrow, I wouldn't ask questions. Tomorrow, I would start looking for answers. The morning after felt like someone had pressed the mute button on our lives. I sat at the kitchen table in my usual spot. My hands were wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm 10 minutes ago. I didn't drink it. I just held it, letting the fading warmth seep into my palms. The blinds were open, letting in streaks of pale morning sunlight. They cut across the granite counter like sharp, accusatory lines. Usually I loved this light. It meant a new day. It meant fresh starts. Today, it just felt like a spotlight on a stage where a bad play was about to begin. Sarah moved around the kitchen like an actress hitting her marks. There was a rhythm to her movements that was too precise. Skillets sizzled. Plates clinked. The refrigerator door opened and closed with a suction thud. It was a cheerful, domestic rhythm of someone playing house. She was even humming under her breath. It was some pop tune from the radio, a melody that felt jarringly upbeat against the heaviness in my chest. Eggs and toast, just how you like them, she said brightly. She slid a plate in front of me. The steam rose up, smelling of butter and comfort. Coffee is fresh, too. I made a new pot. I looked up at her. I didn't just look. I watched. Really watched. I saw the way she smiled too much, too quickly. The corners of her mouth turned up, but the skin around her eyes remained tight. I heard the way her voice carried a jagged edge of false cheer. It was like a car engine revving too high to mask the rattle underneath. She was overcompensating. She was trying to bury the silence of the bedroom under the noise of breakfast. For months, I had been too tired to notice these things. That is the excuse we give ourselves, isn't it? We get busy. The work at the office drains us. The deadlines pile up. Late nights leave us foggy. I had let myself believe that she was simply distant because of my own distractions. I told myself that marriage has seasons, that we were just in a winter that would eventually thaw. But now, with my suspicions sharp as glass, I could see every fracture in her performance. "Thanks," I said. My voice was steady, neutral. I was proud of that steadiness. It took every ounce of will I had not to ask her who she was humming for. She sat down across from me. She folded her hands for a brief moment, a pious little gesture, before picking up her fork. "You have been quiet lately," she said with a soft smile. She tilted her head, mimicking concern. "Is everything okay at work?" I nodded slowly. I picked up a piece of toast. It felt dry in my hand. "Work is fine." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flicked down at her plate too quickly. She speared a piece of egg, chewing with a show of calm. She was waiting for me to engage. She wanted me to complain about my boss, or talk about the traffic, or discuss the weather. She wanted the mundane. The mundane is safe. The mundane means we are not talking about the jacket in the car. The silence stretched between us. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was heavy. It was dense. It was a kind of silence where every word left unsaid builds a wall higher than any argument ever could. I took a bite of the toast, though it tasted like cardboard. My gaze never left her face. She chuckled suddenly. It was a nervous sound. She reached for the orange juice, her hand trembling just slightly. "You are staring at me," she said. "Do I have something on my face?" "No," I said. "Just thinking." "About what?" I shook my head slightly, sipping the cold coffee. "Doesn't matter." Her laughter faltered. She leaned back in her chair, wiping her mouth with a napkin. She was trying again. She was relentless in her pursuit of normalcy. "Well, maybe we should plan something this weekend," she said. Her voice pitched up an octave. "We could go hiking, or maybe see a movie. We've been so wrapped up in routine. Maybe we just need to shake things up." There was again the overcompensation. It is like painting over water damage. You can cover the stain. You can make it look fresh and white and clean for a few days. But the pipe behind the drywall is still broken. The ceiling is still leaking. Eventually, the rot comes through. I let her words hang in the air. I didn't answer right away. I watched her fidget with the napkin. In that moment, I realized how long I had been blind. The Sarah sitting across from me wasn't the same woman I had married in this very house 5 years ago. That woman had looked at me with unguarded warmth. That woman had laughed without effort. That woman didn't need to plan restart dates because she was happy just sitting on the couch with me. This woman, her laugh was hollow. Her eyes were calculating. Her love had become conditional, curated, counterfeit. And I couldn't shake the truth pressing it around me. The drift hadn't happened overnight. It hadn't happened because of a jacket. The jacket was just a tombstone. The death had happened months ago. It had been building, layer by layer, lie by lie, while I was too busy chasing deadlines and convincing myself everything at home was steady. I set my fork down. My appetite was gone. "Breakfast is good," I said softly. It was the only lie I would tell that morning. She smiled again, wide, quick, relieved. "See? I still know how to take care of you." I didn't answer. I just looked at her. "Yes," I thought, "you know how to take care of the image of us. But you forgot how to take care of me." The kitchen smelled of eggs and toast and roasted coffee beans. It was the smell of a happy home. But all I could taste was distance. It coated my tongue. It sat heavy in my stomach. I stood up and took my plate to the sink. I washed it off, staring out the window at the driveway where her car sat. The trunk was closed. The secrets were hidden. But I knew they were there. "I have to get going," I said, grabbing my keys. "Okay," she chirped. "Have a good day. Love you." I walked out the door without saying it back. I couldn't. The words felt like ash in my mouth. As I backed my car out of the driveway, I saw her silhouette in the kitchen window. She was watching me leave. She probably thought she had survived the morning. She probably thought the storm had passed because I ate her toast and didn't scream. She was wrong. The storm wasn't passing. The storm was just gathering strength. And I was done being the man who didn't see the clouds. I drove away from the house, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't look back. I had work to do, and none of it involved my office. It was a Tuesday when I finally gave in. A week of brutal breakfasts, silent evenings, and empty smiles had done their job. The questions in my head were no longer whispering. They were screaming. You can only live with a ghost for so long before you start trying to grab hold of the sheet to see what is underneath. During my lunch break, I found myself standing beneath the cold fluorescent lights of a tech store. I felt out of place. Around me, teenagers were looking at headphones, and couples were debating television sizes. I was standing in the aisle with the accessories, thumbing the sleek white package of a single Apple AirTag. It felt small in my hand, insignificant. The cashier scanned it without comment. He slid it across the counter, like it was just another gadget, just another piece of plastic to help you find your keys. He didn't know. To him, it was inventory. To me, it was proof waiting to be found. Or maybe it was the quietest kind of confirmation that I was the one unraveling. I walked out of the store with the device in my pocket. It felt heavy like a stone. That night, while Sarah showered, I slipped outside. The air was humid. Crickets chirped in the bushes, indifferent to the domestic espionage happening in the driveway. Her car sat there, the silver Honda she had driven for years. I moved quickly. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was not exciting. It was nauseating. I was a husband snooping on his wife. I was a man reducing 5 years of marriage to a tracking device hidden under a spare tire. I lifted the trunk liner. I slid the tag deep into the well, out of sight, out of reach. The click of the trunk latch sounded louder than a gunshot in the quiet neighborhood. I paused, listening. I waited for a window to open, for a voice to call out. But there was nothing, just the distant hiss of the shower upstairs. I went back inside. I sat on the couch and opened a book. When she came down in her robe, towel wrapped around her wet hair, I didn't look up immediately. "You okay?" she asked, towel drying her neck. "Yeah," I said, "just checking the mailbox." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. I didn't flinch, but I didn't lean in either. That night, I barely slept. The app sat open on my phone, glowing faintly on the nightstand like a sentinel. A little blued marked her location. It was right there, at home, next to me. The next day, the vigil began. She left for work at 7:30 a.m. Like always, the AirTag pinged her car's location outside her clinic in the city. She stayed there until 5 p.m. Then the dot moved. I watched it crawl across the map of the city. It stopped at her gym across town. At 6:40 p.m., the dot returned to our house. Thursday, the same pattern. Friday, the same. Saturday, she went to the grocery store. Then the gym again. She was back by noon. Laundry hummed upstairs. She folded towels on the couch while watching reality shows. By Sunday night, I was exhausted. I lay awake beside her, scrolling through the history of her movements. It was a loop, a perfect, innocent loop. She hadn't veered once. Not to a strange hotel, not to someone's apartment. No mysterious hour-long gaps. Just work, gym, home. I told myself I should feel relief. I told myself, "See, Michael, you are crazy. It was just a jacket. She is telling the truth." But I didn't feel relieved. I felt restless. Suspicion doesn't dissolve just because the trail runs cold. It festers in the quiet. It grows in the dark. She lay next to me, breathing slow and even. I studied her profile in the shadows. The shape of her nose. The way her lips parted slightly when she slept. It was so familiar. But something still felt off. It is like the difference between a real flower and a plastic one. From across the room, you might not notice. But up close, you can see the texture is wrong. You can see the life is missing. And so I kept watching. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Each time, the AirTag showed the same path. But every time her car returned to our driveway, I felt a strange tightening in my chest. The lack of deviation began to feel less like innocence and more like strategy. Because here's what I knew about human nature. We are messy. We run late. We stop for coffee. We take the long way home to hear the end of the song. Sarah's life had become a grid. It was choreographed. And at home, the choreography continued. She had started making our bed in the morning. Something I usually did. She offered to cook more dinners. She laughed too easily at my dry comments. She touched my shoulder in the kitchen with a softness I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't comfort. It was control. She was curating a perfect week to match her perfect alibi. By Thursday, the doubt was no longer just in my mind. It had seeped into my bones. The technology wasn't enough. A blue dot on a map tells you where the car is, but it doesn't tell you who is in it. It doesn't tell you what is happening in the parking lot. I found myself driving downtown without really deciding to. I drove past the corners I used to walk with Sarah. I passed a diner where we used to eat on Sundays. I parked in front of a brick building with flaking paint and narrow stairs. A crooked gold plaque near the buzzer read, Cold War Investigations. It wasn't fancy. There was no smoke-filled noir fantasy here. Just a heavy door, a hallway that smelled of floor wax, and a choice. The office smelled like stale coffee and years of dust. The carpet was a shade of brown that had given up hope in the 90s. A single fan clicked unevenly in the corner. Cole Ward was sitting at his desk when I walked in. He was wearing a gray button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His face was carved by time and tobacco. He didn't look surprised to see me. In his line of work, I imagined surprise was a luxury he couldn't afford. "You must be Michael," he said. He motioned toward the creaky wooden chair across from him. "Come in. Shut the door behind you." I did. He waited. He let the silence hang just long enough to make it clear that he wasn't going to chase me for answers. He was a listener. I was the one with the burden. So I spoke. I found a jacket. I began, in the back seat of my wife's car. Men's. Not mine. Cole didn't flinch. He just opened a battered notebook and clicked his pen. Go on. I told him everything. I told him about Sarah's too smooth lie at dinner. I told him about her sudden bedroom charm. I told him about the AirTag. I pulled out my phone and showed him the app, the perfect circle of her week. It's too perfect, I said, feeling foolish even as I said it. She goes to the gym every day at 5 o'clock. She stays for 90 minutes. Then she comes home. When I finished, he just nodded slowly. He tapped his pen on the paper. Cheaters don't always run, Michael. Not when they are careful, he said. His voice was gravelly, worn. The smart ones, they stick to patterns. Normal is the best disguise. If you want to hide a lie, you sandwich it between two truths. He closed the notebook. Okay, give me full access to the AirTag location. I will keep monitoring it, but I'm going to put eyes on her. Technology is blind. It sees the car, not the driver. And if nothing hits, I asked if I am just being paranoid, then I'll still be watching, he said, and you will sleep better. His voice was low, steady. It wasn't dramatic, but something about it cut deeper than any vow Sarah had whispered in our bed lately. This was a transaction of truth. I handed him a manila envelope I had prepared that morning. It contained copies of Sarah's schedule, photos of her car, the gym membership details, and even the address of her favorite coffee shop. Cole leafed through it like it was a map. Okay, he said, we will keep this quiet. You hear from me when it matters. Don't call me. I call you. We shook hands. His grip was firm. No nonsense. Back in my car, I sat behind the wheel and stared out at the late afternoon sky. It was gray, threatening rain. I thought I would feel guilty. I thought I would feel like I was betraying her by hiring a stranger to watch her life. But I didn't. Somewhere between the fake laughs and the scripted affection, she had already turned me into a spectator in my own marriage. She had put up the glass wall. Now, I was just buying a ticket to see the show. She was waiting for me when I got home. It was late afternoon, the kind where the sun hangs low and gets in your eyes, blinding you with a gold light that feels more abrasive than warm. I parked the car and sat there for a moment. I looked at the front door of my house. For 5 years, that door had meant safety. It had meant the end of the workday and the beginning of the real day. Now, it just looked like a barrier I had to breach. I walked inside. Sarah was standing in the living room. Her arms were crossed, her posture rigid, like she had been rehearsing how to stand in the mirror before I arrived. The soft yellow light of the floor lamp behind her gave everything a fuzzy, dreamlike quality, but the tension in the room was sharp enough to cut. Hey, stranger, she said. Her voice was too light, too bright. It bounced off the walls, hollow and echoing. I dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. The clatter was the only honest sound in the room. I offered a nod, a small, tight movement of my chin. That was it, I said. She followed me into the kitchen. She moved close, invading the personal space I had been trying to carve out for days. She didn't feel the wall between us, or maybe she was just determined to smash through it with sheer force of will. I made that chicken you love, she said. Lemon, garlic, a little bit of thyme. It smells good, right? I stopped. I looked at the stove. The same meal, the same scent as the night I found the jacket. It wasn't a meal anymore. It was a prop. It was a tool she used to reset the stage, to drag us back to the beginning of a scene where everything was fine. I opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. The cold condensation felt grounding against my hand. I took a long sip before answering. Sure, I said. She blinked. That forced smile stretched across her lips again. It looked painful. It looked like a mask that was sliding off, and she was using every muscle in her face to keep it in place. You are quiet again, she said. I leaned against the counter, watching her over the rim of the bottle. I have been quiet for a while, Sarah. You just started noticing. She hesitated. She folded her arms tighter, protecting her chest. Is this still about that stupid jacket? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. She stepped closer. Michael, I told you. It was a co-worker. He needed a ride. That is it. I have been trying. Okay? I have been showing up. I have been cooking. I have been talking. I am being here. Being here, I repeated. Is that what you call this? I turned and walked into the living room. I needed to sit down. My legs felt heavy, weighed down by the sheer effort of existing in the same space as her lies. I sank into the couch and turned on the TV. I kept the volume low. It was a cooking show. Someone was chopping onions. Sarah followed me. She stood near the armrest, staring down at me. Her shadow fell over my face. "Do you want me back?" she asked. For the first time, her voice cracked. It wasn't the polished crack of an actress. It was a jagged sound of someone losing control. "Is that what this is?" she continued, her voice rising. "Some punishment game? You are trying to make me feel like nothing." I muted the screen. The room plunged into silence. "Say something," she demanded. "You want something to hold on to, Sarah?" I asked, looking up at her. "Here is something. I don't believe a word you say anymore. That is not a punishment. That is a fact." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked as if I had slapped her. "So you think I am lying?" "I think," I said, my voice steady, "that you have been lying for a while. The difference is, now I am done asking for the truth." She didn't move for a long second. Then her expression hardened. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a defensive anger. "You have changed," she said, venom creeping into her tone. "You come home like a ghost. You don't laugh. You don't ask about my day. You won't touch me. Maybe I am tired of touching something that doesn't feel real anymore." She recoiled. Then she laughed. It was a brittle, high-pitched sound that had no humor in it. "Wow. So now I am fake. Is that it?" I turned back to the screen and unmuted it. The chef was sautéing vegetables now. The hiss of the pan filled the room. "Don't walk away from me like this," she said. "You are not a victim, Michael. You are just cold." That word hung in the air. Cold. I paused the TV again. I stood up slowly. I faced her. "You think I am cold?" I asked. Maybe. Or maybe I just stopped playing house with someone who forgot this was a real marriage. She opened her mouth to argue, to defend, to spin another web. But nothing came out. She looked at me, and for a fleeting moment, I think she saw the man she used to love. But he was looking at her from a great distance, from the other side of a river she had chosen to cross. I walked past her. I headed toward the stairs. "Michael," she whispered. I stopped, my hand on the banister. "I miss us," she said. Her voice was small, trembling. It was the kind of line that would have broken my heart a week ago. It would have made me turn around. It would have made me apologize for being suspicious. But tonight, I recognized it for what it was. It wasn't a plea for connection. It was a plea for amnesty. She didn't miss us. She missed the safety of my ignorance. She missed a husband who didn't look too closely at the timeline. I miss us too, I thought. But us doesn't live here anymore. I didn't say that out loud. I just kept walking. I went upstairs and closed the bedroom door. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. The emotional lock was already engaged. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened. Downstairs, the TV was still on. Then I heard it click off. Footsteps moved to the kitchen. The clink of a wine glass. The heavy sigh of someone who realizes the script isn't working. We were living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, eating the same food. But we were miles apart. We were two strangers sitting on a bomb. And the terrible part was, only one of us knew the timer had already started ticking. I took out my phone. I checked the app. The blue was downstairs. Safe. Stationary. Then I checked my messages. Nothing from Cole yet, just the silence of waiting. I undressed in the dark and lay down. When Sarah finally came to bed an hour later, she stayed on her side. She didn't reach out. She didn't try to bridge the gap. We lay there back to back, separated by 6 inches of mattress and a universe of secrets. I stared at the shadows on the wall and realized that the loneliness of being with her was far worse than the loneliness of being alone. I closed my eyes. I needed to rest, because when the truth finally arrived, I knew it wasn't going to knock politely. It was going to kick the door down, and I needed to be ready to stand in the wreckage. It was just after 7 p.m. when my phone buzzed. I was sitting in my car, parked in the far corner of the grocery store lot. The engine was humming low, a vibration I felt in the soles of my feet. I couldn't even remember why I had stopped there. I didn't need milk. I didn't need bread. I think I was just looking for an excuse to be alone with my thoughts again, surrounded by plastic bags of silence and the flickering orange glow of the street lamps. The name on the screen lit up like a warning flare. Cole. There was no text message attached. No, call me. No, I found something. Just a single image attachment. My thumb hovered over the notification. I hesitated. It is a strange thing, knowing that your life is divided into 2 parts, the before and the after, and the only thing separating them is a millimeter of glass and a split second of courage. I already knew what was there, not the details, perhaps, but the essence. My gut had told me days ago. Now my eyes just had to catch up. I tapped the screen. The photo filled the display. It brought with it a silence more violent than any scream I've ever heard. It was Sarah. She was standing outside a hotel downtown. It wasn't a cheap motel off the highway. It wasn't a scandalous, hidden place. It was a boutique hotel, the kind with clean glass doors, marble trim, and discreet brass lettering. It was expensive. It was specific. She wasn't alone. A man had his arm around her waist. It wasn't a tentative hold. He held her like he had done it 100 times before. He held her like he knew the curve of her hip better than he knew the back of his own hand. She was leaning in close to him, her mouth near his ear, her fingers curled lightly at his collar, and she was smiling. That was the part that broke me. It wasn't the physical closeness. It wasn't the betrayal of the vows. It was a smile. She wasn't looking nervous. She wasn't looking guilty. She looked warm. She looked comfortable. She looked like a woman who was exactly where she wanted to be. I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. The screen dimmed on its own, fading to black, and I tapped it awake again. I needed to see it. I needed to memorize the geometry of her betrayal. I didn't recognize him. He was tall, neatly dressed, with a confident posture of a man who gets what he wants. But his identity didn't matter. What mattered was her body language, the ease of it. The betrayal didn't explode inside me like I expected it would. There was no fire. There was no urge to punch the dashboard or scream until my throat was raw. Instead, the feeling settled heavy in my chest, like wet concrete poured into my lungs. It hardened instantly. I thought of all the times she had kissed me lately, the softness she'd shown in the kitchen, the dinners she suddenly wanted to cook, the hand on my back in the hallway, the joking light touches, the way she had looked at me and said, "I miss us." She had said it like a spell. She thought if she said enough, it would undo the damage she wasn't done causing. Now I saw it all for what it was. It wasn't affection. It wasn't regret. It was maintenance. She had been tending to her lie the way you water a plant you only half care about. You give it just enough water to keep the leaves green, just enough to keep it upright. But you don't nurture it. You don't love it. You just don't want to die while you are busy planting a new garden somewhere else. I leaned my head back against the headrest. I stared at the fabric roof of the car. One thought spun over and over my mind, dizzying and absolute. I was never crazy. The jacket wasn't random. The tension in her voice wasn't stress. The way she had clung to me in bed wasn't love. It was an eraser. She was trying to wipe away her own guilt on my skin. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing her. And the truth was, she had gone long before that photo was ever taken. I opened the image again. I zoomed in. I looked at the way her eyes softened. I looked at the angle of her hips leaning toward him. There was history in that touch. There was intimacy in that distance between their bodies. Suddenly, a memory came fast, uninvited. It was from our first year of marriage. We were at a beach house in Carolina. The wind was whipping off the ocean, and we were lying on a sun-faded blanket. Her hair was damp with salt water. She had looked over at me then, just for a second, with that same expression, that same unguarded, quiet joy, like I was the center of her gravity. I felt my stomach twist, not with rage, but with a profound, aching grief, because that look didn't belong to me anymore. She had taken it, packaged it up, and given it to a stranger in a tan coat. I sat there in the parking lot for I don't know how long. Time became a blur of headlights and passing carts. The grocery bags I was supposed to buy never made it inside the car. My legs were stiff by the time I finally turned the key in the ignition. I drove home in the dark. At every red light, I picked up my phone. I looked at the photo again, not because I needed confirmation, but because I couldn't look away. It was like trying to understand a car crash by studying the debris. Nothing you find will make the accident less violent, but we search anyway. We look for the skid marks. We look for the cause. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. Her car sat there, quiet, innocent. A silver Honda that held no secrets, only the ghost of a jacket in the back seat. I walked inside. Sarah was on the couch. She was curled up with a blanket, watching a show with the volume too low to hear. "Hey, babe," she said. She didn't look up. Her eyes stayed glued to the screen. I looked at the back of her head. I looked at the curve of her neck. I thought about the photo. I thought about the man's hand on her waist. "Hey," I said. I didn't stop. I walked past the living room. I walked past the kitchen. I went straight to the stairs. She didn't follow me. She didn't ask where the groceries were. She didn't ask why I was late. And that told me everything I still hadn't said out loud. We were living in the same house. We shared a mortgage. We shared a history. But she was no longer in my life. She was a tenant in my heart, and her lease had just expired. I went into the bedroom and closed the door. The silence of the house pressed in on me. But this time I didn't fight it. I welcomed it, because now, at least, the silence was honest. The wondering was over. The knowing had begun. And the knowing, I realized, was a weapon I would use to cut myself free. The next morning, I got dressed in silence. There's a specific way a man dresses when he's going to work, and a different way he dresses when he's going to war. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't fumbling with buttons or searching for a matching sock. I moved with a slow, deliberate calm. I chose a crisp white button-down, freshly pressed slacks, and black shoes that I polished until they caught the gray light coming through the window. It was the kind of outfit you wear when you want to look unshakable. It was armor. Sarah was in the kitchen when I came down. She was leaning against the counter, a mug of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, scrolling, always scrolling. When she heard my footsteps, she looked up. Her eyes paused on me for a fraction of a second too long. "You're dressed up?" she said. It was a question, but barely. "Yeah," I said, adjusting my watch. "I have got some errands to run downtown. Meetings." She nodded slowly. Her eyes narrowed just a little, the way a cat looks at a door that has suddenly been closed. She wanted to ask more. I could see the curiosity itching at her, but she held back. She didn't want to seem too interested, lest I ask her why she suddenly cared about my schedule. "Well, drive safe," she said, turning back to her screen. "I will." I walked out the door without kissing her goodbye. She didn't ask for one. That was our new normal, a polite, bloodless coexistence. Downtown was gray and slick with rain. The windshield wipers beat a steady, hypnotic rhythm against the glass. Slap, slap, slap. It sounded like a metronome counting down the remaining minutes of my marriage. I parked in a garage that smelled of damp concrete and exhaust. I took the elevator to the 16th floor of a law firm I had researched 3 days earlier. Back then, when I looked up the name, I still had a flicker of hope that I wouldn't need it. Now, hope was gone. I wasn't here for hope. I was here for certainty. The office was quiet. High ceilings, plush carpets that swallowed the sound of footsteps, and the soft, unobtrusive hum of expensive HVAC. The lawyer's name was Lauren. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and a demeanor that suggested she had seen every variety of marital collapse there was. She offered polite handshake, then sat across from me behind a massive walnut desk. "How can I help you, Michael?" she asked. Her voice was calm, precise, efficient. "I need a divorce," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. Heavy, final. Lauren didn't blink. She opened a legal pad. "How long have you been married?" 5 years, I said. "No kids. No prenup. Joint accounts. One property." I paused, taking a breath that rattled slightly in my chest. An infidelity is suspected. Well confirmed. I pulled out my phone. I placed it on the polished wood of the table between us. I opened the photo Cole had sent me. Lauren studied it without flinching. She didn't gasp. She didn't offer sympathy. She just nodded once, a professional acknowledgement of the facts, and started writing. "We will need to discuss asset division," she said, not looking up. "I want the house," I said immediately. It wasn't about the bricks or the mortgage. It was about the principle. I didn't want her spinning that house into a sanctuary for someone else. I didn't want her erasing me from the rooms I had painted. And the savings? Lauren asked. "Joint," I said. "I am going to move half of it into a separate account today. Am I within my rights?" She looked at me over her glasses. "Since it is joint, yes. You can access the funds. It is smart to secure your share now, before the filing hits." "Would you like to pursue a grounds-based divorce or no fault?" she asked. "Grounds," I said. I didn't hesitate. "I have proof." She nodded again. Understood. It felt surreal. Truly surreal. Here I was, sitting in a leather chair while soft jazz played in the hallway and rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was making decisions that would shatter my life, splitting everything down the middle. And yet, it all felt like paperwork. It felt like filing taxes. I realized then that anger burns out, sadness fades. But logistics are cold and hard, and they keep you standing when everything else wants to make you fall. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was responding. After we finished reviewing the forms, she slid a copy toward me. "You don't have to serve her today," Lauren said gently. "But once you do, the timeline begins. I will wait for your call." "You'll know when," I said. I left the office and went back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and opened the banking app on my phone. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. It is a strange feeling to look at a number that represents 5 years of shared dreams, vacations we planned, the renovation fund, the safety net, and cut it in half. But I did it. I transferred the funds to a new account I had opened that morning. She would notice eventually, but by then, the papers would be in her hands. That afternoon, I stopped by our storage unit. It was a dusty, dim place on the edge of town. I gathered the documents I had hidden there weeks ago, back when my gut first told me something was wrong. Tax records, deeds, passwords, birth certificates, anything she might try to hide or spin. I organized them like puzzle pieces, labeling every folder. I locked them into a fireproof box and secured it in the trunk of my car. If Sarah was going to lie again, and I knew she would be outmatched, because while she was busy playing the role of the devoted wife, I had stopped playing defense. I was setting the board for the end game. I drove home as the sun was setting. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shiny and black. When I walked inside, Sarah was in the living room. She greeted me with a laugh. Some comedy special was playing on the TV. She glanced up, her face open, casual, like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't shifted on its axis while she sat there. "How were the errands?" she asked. I stood in the entryway. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the comfort in her posture. She thought she was safe. She thought she had fooled me. I smiled faintly. It was a sad smile, but she didn't catch the nuance. "Productive?" she asked, tilting her head. "Productive," I said. She nodded and turned back to the screen. And just like that, we were two strangers sitting on a bomb. Only one of us knew the timer had already started. And only one of us knew exactly when it was going to explode. You know those days in late February? The ones where the sun comes out warm and bright, and the air smells like dirt thawing. It tricks the crocuses into blooming early. It tricks the birds into building nests. It feels like spring, but it isn't. It is a false spring. The frost is still coming. The freeze is just waiting for the sun to go down. I created a false spring for Sarah. I didn't do it to be cruel. I didn't do it for revenge, though I suppose a younger man might call it that. I did it because I needed time. I needed the house to be quiet. I needed her guard to be down, so I could move the pieces of our life around without her noticing. If she knew I knew, she would have panicked. She would have hired her own lawyer, hidden assets, started the war before I was ready. So I decided to give her exactly what she wanted. I gave her the illusion of forgiveness. The first time I touched her again, I made sure it felt like an olive branch. It was a quiet Saturday morning. The light in the kitchen was hazy, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. She was unloading groceries, struggling to balance a mesh bag of oranges in one arm, while a roll of paper towels slipped from under the other. I stepped in. I didn't hesitate. I caught the paper towels before they hit the floor. "Let me help," I said. My voice was gentle. It was the voice I used to use 5 years ago. Her eyes widened. I saw the surprise register there, followed immediately by a flood of relief. She smiled. And for a second, she looked like the woman I used to know. "Thanks," she said. I set the bag on the counter. Then I did the hardest thing I've had to do in this entire ordeal. I reached out and brushed her hand. Lightly, deliberately. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned closer. She turned toward me like a flower turning toward a patch of sunlight it never expected to feel again. She was starving for it. She was desperate for the normalcy she had thrown away. That was the beginning of the performance. Over the next few days, I became an actor in my own home. I softened my tone when I spoke to her. I let her sit next to me on the couch while we watched TV, her legs draped over mine. I kissed her shoulder when I passed behind her in the hallway. I laughed at her jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. I texted her during the day, mundane things like, "How's work?" or "Thinking of you." And she bloomed. She started smiling more. She started humming in the shower again. She slept closer to me, breathing easier, thinking the danger had passed. She thought her little campaign of affection had worked. She thought she had successfully paved over cracks. What she didn't know was that every time she wrapped her arms around me, I was counting down the days. While she was at the gym, or wherever she really was, I was at home, working. I cleared my browser history every night. I hid the divorce documents behind a row of old hardcover encyclopedias in the upstairs closet, the ones I knew she never touched because she said they smelled like mildew. I password protected every new folder on my laptop. I changed the combination on the fireproof box in my trunk. She never questioned a thing. Why would she? She was too busy enjoying the fall spring. One night, the air was warm enough to sit outside. We sat on the back deck, wrapped in a shared blanket. Sarah had strung up these little Edison bulb lights years ago. They cast a soft, amber glow over the yard. We were sipping wine. The crickets were singing. It was a perfect picture of suburban marital bliss. "I missed this," she said softly. She rested her head on my shoulder. I could smell her shampoo. Lavender and vanilla. I kissed her forehead. "Me too," I said, and I wasn't lying. I did miss it. But we were missing two different things. She missed the comfort of having a husband she could fool. She missed a safety net. I missed a version of her that once sat out here with me, barefoot and genuine, before the secrets. I missed the time before I had to hire a private investigator to tell me where my wife was on a Tuesday. I missed the innocence of trusting someone blindly. But you can't go back. You can't unring a bell. And you certainly can't unsee a photo of your wife in another man's arms. So this was just theater. And for the first time in our marriage, I was the one writing the script. Each day, I made her feel safer. I became the attentive husband. I left her sticky notes on the coffee pot. I cleaned the kitchen without being asked. I took her out to dinner one night, just a local Italian place, and I held her hand across the table. She melted like butter in my palms. She looked at me with those big, wet eyes, and I could see her thinking, we made it. We survived. What she didn't know was that while she slept soundly beside me, I was awake. I sat up in the dark, staring at the blue light of my phone, cross-checking timelines. I was preparing statements for my lawyer. I was indexing files. I was building a fortress of facts that she wouldn't be able to storm. She thought my late-night quiet meant peace. It was strategy. The night before everything changed, she turned to me in bed. The room was dark, the only light coming from the moon slicing through the curtains. "Michael," she whispered. "Yeah, I think we're finally okay." Her voice was so hopeful, so sure. I pulled her close. I let her head rest on my chest, so she couldn't see my face. I smiled in the dark. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of a man who sees the finish line after a marathon run in the rain. "Sleep?" I said, because the storm had already passed for me. The anger was gone. The confusion was gone. I knew exactly who she was, and I knew exactly what I had to do. Now, I was just waiting for the sun to rise on her house of cards. I was just waiting to show her the wreckage she had built, brick by brick. She fell asleep in my arms, thinking she was holding her husband. But she wasn't. She was holding a ghost. The real Michael had already packed his bags. He was just waiting for the right moment to walk out the door. And that moment was coming at dinner. Dinner was her idea. She called it a restart meal. She said she wanted to make things feel normal again, to put the weirdness of the last few weeks behind us. She set the table with the good cloth napkins, the ones we usually save for Thanksgiving. She lit candles, tall tapers that flickered in the draft from the air conditioning. The house smelled like rosemary and butter, an old trick she used to make the kitchen feel warmer, more inviting. I didn't say much while she cooked. I just sat at the counter, watching her move through the space. She moved like she belonged there. She moved like we belonged together. But everything felt like a stage now. The props were real, but the actors were playing different genres. She was in a romance. I was in a tragedy. And I already knew how the play ended. At the table, she poured the wine with a little flourish. A heavy red. Expensive. "To us," she said softly, lifting her glass. The candlelight caught the crystal, making it sparkle. I clinked my glass against hers. A sharp, clear sound. I offered a small nod, but I didn't drink. She cut into her steak. "You have been different lately," she said, chewing thoughtfully. "Softer. Less angry." I said nothing. I just watched her eat. "It feels like we are healing," she continued. "Doesn't it? It feels like we turned a corner." Still nothing. She paused. She sensed the weight of my silence. She tilted her head, searching my face. "You are thinking a lot tonight," she added. "Dangerous habit. What is going on in that mind of yours?" I looked up. My hands were folded on the table. I felt calm, terrifyingly calm. "I am thinking," I said steadily, "about what I will do when I become a bachelor." She blinked. Then she laughed. It was sharp at first, a reflex. Then it tried to soften, like she realized the joke didn't land and was trying to backpedal in real time. "Okay," she said, forcing a smile. "Wow, that came out of nowhere. You are not funny, you know that." I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I reached under the table. I pulled out a white envelope. It was thick. It contained the weight of 5 years, distilled into legal language in glossy photo paper. I placed it between us. It sat on the tablecloth like a final card in a poker game. "What is that?" she asked. Her voice was smaller now. The laughter had evaporated. "Open it." She hesitated. She looked at me like maybe this was some elaborate, terrible prank. Maybe it was tickets to a show. Maybe it was a voucher for a trip. But her gut knew. I saw her throat swallow hard. She picked it up. She peeled the tab. She slid out the contents. First came the court summons. Her name. My name. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Then the photo. The one Cole had sent. Her breath caught. A small sound escaped her lips. It was half gasp, half sob. The sound of a balloon losing all its air at once. She stared at the photo for a long time. She stared at it like maybe if she looked hard enough, the image would rearrange itself. Maybe the man's arm would disappear. Maybe her smile would turn into a frown. But the camera doesn't lie. When her eyes finally met mine, they were wide. Wet. Pleading. Michael, she stammered. Please, I can explain. I held up a hand. No stories. No angles. She stood abruptly. Her chair scraped loud and harsh against the tile. It is not what it looks like, she cried. It was a mistake. I was lonely, Michael. You've been so distant. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. You didn't talk to me, I said coldly. You talked to him. Her face contorted. It was a mix of emotions fighting for control. Anger, shame, panic. You have been planning this, she accused, pointing a shaking finger at the papers. All that affection this past week? You pretended everything was fine? You let me think we were okay. I leaned back, swirling the wine I hadn't tasted. Exactly, I said. Exactly how you pretended when you brought him into our lives. Exactly how you smiled in my face every morning after you had been with him. That is not fair, she snapped. No, I said, my voice hardening. I stood up. What is not fair is lying to someone who trusted you with everything. What is not fair is gaslighting your husband into thinking he is crazy because he found a jacket in your car. She collapsed into the chair again. She buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she sobbed. I swear, Michael, it didn't mean anything. Then why did you smile like that? I asked. In the photo, why did you look so happy? She looked up. Her mascara was running. She looked broken. I don't know, she whispered. That silence, that admission, it was worse than any scream. I was going to tell you, she said weakly. I was going to end it. No, Sarah, you were going to keep hiding it until you thought it was safe. You were going to keep me as a safety net while you auditioned him for the lead role. But I beat you to it. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Now we can fix this. Please, I will do anything. Therapy, separation. I will cut him off. I will prove it is ended. I will prove it is already ended. I said. I walked around the table. I stood behind my chair. You just didn't feel it happen, I said. You were too busy looking at him to notice that I had already left the room. I left the papers in front of her. Untouched, I walked to the kitchen. I dropped my wine glass in the sink. It made a soft, final clink against the stainless steel. Behind me, she sobbed into her hands. Michael, please. But I didn't turn around. I didn't go to her. I didn't comfort her. Not because I didn't care, but because, for the first time in a long time, I finally cared about myself more. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed the small bag I had packed that morning, and walked out the front door. The night air was cool. The stars were out. And as I walked toward my car, leaving the candlelight and the rosemary chicken behind, I took the deepest breath I had taken in years. It hurt, but it was clean. 3 months later, my apartment still smelled faintly of cardboard and fresh paint. It was a distinct smell. It was sharp, chemical, and clean. It was the smell of a blank slate. The walls were bare. I hadn't bothered with art yet. I wasn't ready to commit to holes in the drywall. There was just one framed photo of my brother and me from a fishing trip 15 years ago. It balanced against the living room shelf, leaning there tentatively, as if I were still deciding whether it deserved a permanent nail. The furniture was minimal. It was new, gray, and sharp-edged. It was the kind of stuff you buy not because it matches your soul, but because it has no memory attached to it. None of these cushions had ever been sat on by Sarah. None of these tables had ever held her wine glass. That was the point. Tonight, however, the space didn't feel empty. It felt full. Friends filled the living room. Matt was there, sitting on the arm of the sofa with a beer in hand, talking about his kids' soccer league. Darius was standing by the window, cracking one of his terrible jokes that we all laughed at anyway because the familiarity was comforting. And Kayla, my neighbor from the third floor, had wandered in earlier with a tray of cupcakes. She claimed they were store-bought, but they tasted too good to be anything but homemade. Laughter echoed off the drywall. It was a strange sound to hear in my own home. For the last year of my marriage, laughter had been a rare commodity. It had been something we rationed, something we forced. But this was easy. It was a messy, overlapping noise of people who weren't trying to hide anything. We played cards. We swapped stories. We debated over which album to play on the Bluetooth speaker. For the first time in a long time, the noise felt human. It didn't feel like static. It didn't feel like cover fire for a secret war. Someone raised a toast to fresh starts. We all clinked glasses. I smiled. I even laughed. But inside, I was quiet. It wasn't a broken quiet. It was just still. It was a feeling of the ocean after a hurricane has finally moved out to sea. The waves are still choppy, but the wind has died down. Later, the door finally closed behind the lasserby. The lock clicked. The silence rushed back into the room, reclaiming the space. I cleaned up slowly. I threw away paper plates. I wiped crumbs off the counter. I turned off the music. Then I poured myself a glass of water and went to stand by the window. My apartment was on the 8th floor. I stared out over the city. The skyline blinked with yellow and orange dots, 1,000 little lives stacked on top of each other. Traffic hummed on the highway below, a ribbon of red taillights fading into the distance. The world kept moving. It didn't care who got hurt. It didn't care about betrayal or divorce papers or empty houses. It just kept spinning. And strangely, I found comfort in that indifference. It hit me then, not all at once, like a lightning strike, but gently, like the tide coming in. I didn't miss Sarah anymore. I took a sip of water. I rolled the thought around in my mind, testing it for cracks. I missed the idea of her. I missed the comfort of a shared blanket on a Tuesday night. I missed the mindless rituals, the way she knew how I took my coffee, the way we split the Sunday paper. I missed the way her voice softened when she asked if I wanted tea before bed. But when I look back, honestly, without the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia, I realize those things have been fading long before the photo arrived on my phone. They had been fading before I found the jacket. She had been slipping out of our marriage quietly, incrementally, like sand pouring between my fingers. I had spent so much energy trying to grip tighter, trying to hold on to the grains, that I hadn't realized my hand was already empty. I had been in love with a memory. I had been fighting to save a ghost. Now, standing in this gray apartment with its sharp-edged furniture, I had space. I had silence. I had time to rebuild, without someone reshaping the truth to fit their guilt. I wasn't rushing toward someone new. Kayla was kind, and her cupcakes were sweet, but I wasn't looking for a hand to hold. I wasn't trying to fill the bed or the closet or the silence. There's a pressure, especially when you are older, to bounce back. People tell you to get back out there. They tell you life is short. They treat being alone like a medical condition that needs to be cured. But I have learned that healing doesn't look like moving on fast. It looks like walking slower. It looks like finally sleeping through the night without waking up at 3 a.m., wondering where she is. It looks like making a pot of coffee for one and enjoying the ritual of it. It looks like standing at the window, not to watch for a silver Honda pulling into the driveway, but just to breathe. I looked at the reflection of my own face in the glass. I looked older than I did 5 years ago. There were new lines around my eyes. There was a little more gray in my beard, but the tension was gone. The hunted look was gone. I was no longer a detective in my own life. I was just a man. Maybe one day, a year from now or two, I will open that door to someone else. Maybe I will let someone walk in who carries honesty in their hands instead of secrets. Someone who doesn't need to hide their phone. Someone whose jacket belongs exactly where they left it. But not yet. Tonight, I am good with the quiet. Tonight, I am good with the walls being bare. I turned away from the window. I turned off the lamp in the living room, plunging the apartment into darkness. I walked to the bedroom, my footsteps soft on the floor. Some endings come with screaming matches and slamming doors. Some endings sound like sirens. But mine came with a signature on a piece of paper and a quiet drive across town. It was a steady closing. And as I lay down in the center of the bed, stretching out into the empty space, I realized it was the softest kind of peace.